If you were to ask someone what one of the most influential games for them growing up was, I doubt many of them would bring up a Flash game. An archaic medium used for simple programs and animations that didn't typically lead to games or products with any sort of depth to them. But for me, it was a bit of a different story. Sometime around Christmas of 2013, while on vacation, my brother showed me this site that had been passed around his school by the handle of 3dtuning.stuner.net. It may not look like much, but at the time, I was a little dumbfounded. To give context, around this era, I was playing an absolute ton of Forza, an experience that probably most kids into cars went through. But like in many games, there was something totally absent from these titles: real customization. You could perfectly spec out your car in every detail, drive it on some of the greatest tracks, both real and fictional, but when it came to making your car look cool, there was really nothing there. You had one, maybe two kits per chassis, half of which were usually not great, a selection of a handful of cool wheels, because apparently the licensing costs of a work wheel other than the Equipo One was more than adding 1,000 tertiary brands. Not only that, things like offsets were just totally unadjustable. This came at the perfect time for someone like me who was just getting into cars in a major way. Now, why is that? S-Tuner was a site solely dedicated to building out my favorite cars at the time, S-Chassis. A place to build a car to your heart's content. You could select body style, various kits, wheels, and a wide selection of universal parts. From those, there was wheels and kits that I'd never even seen before. Being that this was also the height of the stance era, finally being able to give your tires a little bit of stretch was shocking to say the least. As I touched on before, this game left you at the helm in terms of design choices. Slam your car to the ground? Sure. Raise it 2 feet in the air? Why not? Take your quarter panel off, 35J VSKFs, 2-foot wide bodies, or actually make something that looked good. It was all up to you. I would continue playing the game throughout my childhood regularly, while the devs slowly added new cars. It may have just started out with the S12, S13, S14, but slowly branched out to other S-chassis, R-chassis, and new brands altogether. I remember trying to absolutely speedrun whatever Excel lesson I had in computer class just to get 30% of the way into my build before being told to actually do something productive. Just to go home where I ended up doing the exact same thing for hours with no real goal. But as time moved on, my attention was definitely shifted elsewhere, with other games taking center stage. But lately I've been having a hankering to go back and revisit. It had been close to 3 or so years since I'd booted it up. So what would it be like today? Well, there's an issue with that. To start, S-Tuner was built out using Flash, and in 2020, Adobe had totally relinquished all support for the program. Visiting the site today gives you a prompt telling you to enable the Flash player despite your browser definitely no longer supporting it. Trust me when I say this, literally none support it. I checked all of them. Sometime since, the devs tried switching it over to HTML5, but only got what seems like halfway through before giving up, leaving it in a broken and quite sorry state. Before I started this video, I really thought that the main program that most things were built off of only 15-ish years ago would still be somewhat accessible today, but no, not really. When it comes to the more popular titles, people have since worked on bringing them to emulators like Flashpoint. But this would not work for S-Tuner without some way to actually download the files. A lot of people use browser extensions, but I tried to avoid these since they all seemed like adware. So how can it be done? What I was able to do is, in essence, download an older version of Firefox, and when you head over to the site, it works. Before actually starting, I was honestly a little nervous. When revisiting anything from my adolescence, there's always this looming fear that it will never stack up, and that things that I did should always remain as simple, fun little memories in my brain. That trying it out for the first time in so long would not only result in me feeling a bit sad, but would also in a way taint my memories as a kid. Nevertheless, curiosity got the best of me and I went back. As soon as I loaded it up, it all started to hit me. Of course, the first car I had to modify was my favorite from back then, the S13 hatch. And eventually I worked my way through the back catalog, car after car. Was it all that I hoped it would be? No. Was it what I expected it to be? Definitely. I started to remember the weird jank that you'd have to go through to do something as simple as change the color of a door handle. Now sometimes you would just put on a kit and they just forgot to add the other pieces to it. Not to mention how some of the models just look weirdly uncanny. Like I just can't build an 8.6 because it looks a little bit strange. Same thing for the wheels. Well, I thought this was a massive selection as a kid because at the time it was. As now I know more than 2 wheels, it seems to be missing a lot of my favorites. Way better than anything you got out of a AAA game at the time, but still. After going back, it became sort of obvious why I stopped playing the game. In many ways, I sort of just did it all. I built every single car I wanted to in every single way, and in the same vein, my tastes have definitely shifted. Well, I probably made a million SIL 80 trucks on TE37s because as a kid I was dumb. Doing the same sort of thing now just feels a little bit odd. I definitely don't have the same sort of imagination or naivety. Naivety? Let me look this up. Naivety. I definitely don't have the same sort of imagination or naivety as I once did. I developed some taste, but definitely at the cost of creativity. Thankfully, as I continued building, one thing that did come back to me was just how relaxing this game was. There really is something cathartic about just meticulously combing over every little detail that you can. Even if it's just barely noticeable and you won't end up showing anybody, there's something about it that just feels nice. After putting the game down, I think it really made me realize something. This, in many ways, was probably the reason I've always had a bit of an obsession with car styling. I've always really appreciated small details, interesting aero, and really looking at special cars that truly capture my attention to try and figure out what exactly makes them tick for me. If I had never spent so many of my formative years trying to do that exact thing for myself, I doubt I would enjoy it today. My main takeaway from this was really how much it reminded me of the beauty of simple games. Well, most of what's coming out today tries to be an open world, online, RPG, RTS, MMO, MOBA, racing simcade. There seems to be a magic that comes from games with one idea or objective. It strikes a healthy balance of ease of use while still having somewhat in-depth customization that stems from the fact that you can actually drive them. Keeping the game simple really allowed you to think outside the box and still does a great job at encouraging the player to dig deeper. I tried reaching out to the dev email that was on the site, but shockingly, no one checks the specific game email that probably sees almost zero traffic. I was interested in telling the story of the development process or maybe getting a little bit more background information as to why it was made, since there really isn't much in terms of videos on it uploaded to YouTube, especially within the last few years. But sometimes it's just how it be. If you've watched this video to the end and it seems like something you would be interested in, I've made sure to leave a link to where I found the flash method I used. I'm not too sure how many of you actually played it, but if so, hopefully this gave you a little reminder, like it did for me. And if you decide to play it, being your first time, let me know how it goes. I'm curious to see what people think of it 10 years removed. I would also like to say thank you to whoever made this game. I'm sure you probably don't realize how much something you made really affected someone like me. But most importantly, thanks for watching.